Ever catch yourself feeling guilty for missing one workout, even when you've been consistent for months? Or how about this one, beating yourself up over ordering takeout after an entire week of home cooked meals? That voice in your head telling you that you're not doing enough? We need to talk about it, my friend, because what if the secret to your success isn't in doing more, but actually in expecting less? Welcome to the Magic Mindfulness podcast, where today we are exploring how to create success without the exhaustion. I'm your host, Rachel Hupp, yoga coach, and I help women trust themselves to walk the path of their inner calling. Today, we're diving into expectation overload. This is a conversation, a topic that has come up in conversation over and over and over again with my closest friends over the last several weeks. And so I just wanted to bring it up here today because if I'm feeling it, if my closest friends are feeling it, there's a really good chance that you're feeling it too. And so, what do I mean by expectation overload? It's that crushing feeling that no matter how much you do, it's never quite enough. I'm going to share with you today why it's not your fault, what is happening in your brain when you set these impossible standards, and I'm going to share a practical technique with you that combines CBT, cognitive behavior techniques, along with yoga philosophy to help you to break free from this cycle. My hope is that, and my intention is, that by the end of today's episode, you will have tools in your toolbox to help you maintain your success without that constant mental beatdown, right? It's exhausting. And I'm going to show you how to set what I call human sized expectations that actually work in real life. So, I want to talk to you about, those mornings when I don't know, maybe you relate to this. You apologize for bringing store-bought cookies to the meeting that you organized perfectly, or you feel guilty for missing just one workout, like I talked about before. Or maybe you're like me. At one point, I thought I was on top of everything at work. I was trying to juggle all the things, keep all those plates spinning up in the air. Um, but I couldn't fully enjoy my successes because I was already focused, always even focused on the next should. So, I want to be real with you. Today's episode is not about time management, although I could certainly spend an entire month or week of episodes talking just about time management. You probably are already great at that. In fact, just to kind of sidetrack a little bit, I was working with a coach one time and we were working on time blocking. And, I work full time, I coach part time, I teach yoga 4 classes a week right now. And I send out 2 newsletters a week. I post videos to YouTube, meditations to YouTube, and Insight Timer here and there. And so, plus, I've got to take care of myself. I'm not going to sacrifice my sleep. I'm not going to sacrifice my health. And I've got to prioritize my home and my relationships. And so, meeting with my coach to assess my time management skills, my time blocking skills. And he was like, Rachel, most people aren't very good at managing their time. You don't have any time left to manage. And that was a huge eye opener for me because I was literally cramming my days from the time I woke up in the morning until the time I went to bed. Everything was scheduled perfectly, which meant that if something went off course, there was no buffer. There was no room to rebound or change course, right? And so that meant that everything got bumped. And so either I was behind or I was staying up late, which I try not to do, or, other things shifted. And so I want to tell you, this isn't about time management because you're probably already really great at that. Today, I want to talk more about those impossible standards that we set for ourselves, those the ones that make us feel like we are failing, even when we are successful by all outward measures. Somebody asked me the other day how I managed to keep everything together, how I managed to stay on top of everything with everything that I'm juggling. And I almost laughed out loud because I don't have it all together. I don't have it all together by any means, I'm behind on so many different things. But whose expectations are those, right? Who's judging me? Who knows I'm behind other than me? So let's get into this. By all outward measures, I look to many people like I've got it all together. And let me tell you, my friend, I'll be the first one to tell you, I do not have it all together. And I see this in my coaching practice all the time. Accomplished, successful women who look like they have it all together on the outside, but privately, they are exhausted. We are exhausted from trying to live up to our own expectations. Maybe that sounds familiar to you too, right? And like I said, one of my friends asked me, how do you do it all? How do you have it all together? And I've got to just reiterate to you, I most certainly do not have it all together. We coach, we teach what we've most needed to learn. And exactly like you, I juggle all the things. And I still, even through all the practices, even with everything I've got in my toolbox, I expect more from myself than I know is realistic. I expect more from myself than I know is healthy. And so it is not your fault. We did not wake up one day and decide that we were going to be this hard on ourselves. We did not decide one day that we were going to be superwoman and be able to do it all, juggle it all. If you're like me, you've probably built a successful career. You've probably built a successful life by setting high standards, by living up to those high standards, by modeling those high standards. And those standards have served us well in many ways. In fact, I've had a few conversations recently with friends who say things like, Rachel, you know, I know this isn't sustainable, but I don't know how to dial it back without everything falling apart, right? I've got so much on my plate. I don't have time to do it all, but there's nothing that I can give up. If I don't do it, it's not going to get done. Or other people aren't going to do it to my standards. So I might as well do it myself. Does any of that sound familiar to you? Because I've been there. Many of my clients have been there. Many of my friends have been there. We worry these days in this time of constant accessibility always being on. If we're not available 24/7, if we're not constantly not meeting, but exceeding expectations, we'll lose everything that we've worked for. And I get it. I have been on this path with you, my friend. You are not failing at life. That's what I want you to know. You are not failing at life. You are responding to a system that keeps us striving and feeling like we're never quite enough. So, why do we do this? Now, I don't know if you know, I actually have a background in science and also a background in cognitive behavioral technique coaching, life coaching. And so, at a high level, I just want to talk a little bit about the psychology behind our behavior, why we do what we do, why we consistently set impossible expectations. And here's the thing, when we consistently set these impossible expectations for ourselves, we engage in something that is called perfectionist thinking patterns. And I'm guessing you know what that means. You've probably been there. I know I have. These perfectionist thinking patterns create a cognitive loop where we set these superhuman expectations. Because we can't meet them, we inevitably fall short. Because we fall short on our expectations for ourselves, we feel shame or self criticism. And because of those feelings of low self worth, we push harder to prove our worth. And then the cycle repeats, right? We set these superhuman expectations. We fall short. We criticize ourselves. We feel shameful. We push harder to prove our worth. But who are we proving that worth to, right? Something to think about. This perfectionist thinking pattern or loop is reinforced by something called intermittent reinforcement. What do I mean by that? Well, here's the thing, my friend. Sometimes, by some superhuman act of will, we do manage to meet these impossible standards. And so that makes us think that we should be able to do it all the time. But here's the truth, just because you can do something once does not mean that it's sustainable, does not mean that it's healthy, and it does not mean that we should expect it consistently. There was a time in my former world where I had a super, super, super high stress corporate job. And literally, I felt like my entire job was just like fighting fires because I could never just do my daily work. It was always putting out the emergency that arose that day. It was always reacting. We were always in reactive mode. And because of that, we were always feeling like we had to be in that hero mode, right? Like you always had to step up, you always had to do more, you always had to deliver more. And for me, I was on the edge of burnout. It was not sustainable for me. I had to make my way out of that role. But that's something that many of us deal with. That's something that many of us face on a regular basis. And so, I see you, I feel you, but remember, just because you could do it once does not mean it's healthy to sustain. And it doesn't mean that you should expect yourself to do it all the time. And if you're in that crazy corporate world that I was in, it doesn't mean that the people around you should expect it all the time either. That's not a healthy work environment. It's just not. So, what is the solution? How do we break this pattern? What is the way to get out of this cycle? I want to share with you a technique that has been a game changer, not only for me, but also for my clients. And it's called the minimum baseline technique. And you don't have to remember that. It is a cognitive behavior technique approach that I have been able to combine and merge with yoga wisdom to help us ambitious types set more realistic goals. So, as an example, let's just take a morning routine. So, instead of that mental checklist that goes hour of yoga, check, 20 minutes of meditation, check, journaling, green smoothie, inbox zero before 8 a.m., that feels exhausting. Now, depending on what time you wake up, it might feel mindful. I love to meditate in the morning. I love to do yoga in the morning. I love to journal in the morning, and I love my green smoothie. I am not sure I'm the type that will ever get to inbox zero, but hey, there's always hope, right? So let's get real about what actually moves the needle for your day. Maybe your minimum baseline is this, and this is where the minimum baseline technique comes into play, right? So maybe your minimum baseline is 10 minutes of stretching, even if you're in your pajamas, and eating something nourishing, even if it's a protein bar. That's it. We're focused on progress, not perfection. So anything beyond that minimum baseline, it's a bonus, but it's not a requirement. And here is where yoga adds another layer of wisdom. In yoga, we have this concept, it's called ahimsa, non-violence, non-harming, and it includes compassion towards ourselves. The ancient yogis understood something that modern psychology is just catching up to. Sustainable growth comes from a place of self-compassion, not self-criticism. And so approaching this from a place of self awareness, self compassion, non harming, not beating ourselves up, and setting a minimum goal. How many times, I don't know, all the perfectionists out there, raise your hand. When I thought that I needed to have this really powerful morning routine, an hour of yoga, 20 minutes of meditation, journaling, my green smoothie, inbox zero. If I didn't have time to do it all, I would do nothing. And many of my clients were the same way. It's all or nothing, that black or white approach. And let's be real, life is crazy busy. We are dealing with a lot of chaos in our day to day lives. We need to find the spectrum of gray between the black and the white. And so that's where this minimum baseline techniques comes in. What is the bare minimum that you can do when you wake up in the morning or whatever you're applying this to that's going to help you to feel like you are satisfied, right? You can always do more, but you don't have to do more. So for me, my minimum baseline, I'm going to meditate every single morning. Now, my ideal is 20 minutes. On days that feels challenging, if I meditate for 10 minutes, that's fine. If I meditate for 5 minutes, that's fine. If I meditate for 2 minutes, that's fine. Now, this is a part of my daily routine now. It's been a practice. When I first started, my goal was simply to meditate every single day. And so these practices can build upon each other. But when I first started using this minimum baseline approach, what I discovered was when I dropped the pressure to have that perfect morning routine and when I stuck to my baseline, I actually ended up doing more, not less. Why? Because it didn't feel so pressured. It didn't feel like an all or nothing proposition. It felt like something that was sustainable, something I could do. It didn't feel overwhelming. My goal at first, literally, I set a goal to meditate for a minimum of 2 minutes a day. That was it. And some days that was all I did, and that was fine. But what I often found was that once I made that time to get to my mat, I was more comfortable staying on my mat. And by getting to my mat for my meditation, I found that I was more willing to stay for my breath work or for my yoga practice, my asana practice. And so commit to your minimum, but allow space for more, right? And so, just bringing this all together, that exhaustion that you are feeling, it's not from doing too much necessarily. Maybe it's more from expecting too much, right? Reflect on that. See how it sits with you. See how you feel about it, because this is my experience. That doesn't mean that it's your own. For me, I was placing unrealistically high expectations of myself. Um, there's someone I follow on social media, and she was talking recently about how she was working with a coach, and her coach was telling her, and she works for herself, by the way. And so her coach was telling her that it sounded like her boss had unrealistic and overly demanding expectations of her. And let me tell you how that hit home with me, my friend, because yeah, I do work. I have a full-time job, but my side job, my yoga and my mindfulness coaching and my yoga coaching, that's all me. And so I'm working this full-time job, but I've also got this side job, this part-time job. And I'm trying to work it I have very high expectations. Um, I spend a lot of time and energy on it. I love it. I love what I do. It's very fulfilling for me. Um, but sometimes I have to take a step back and say, okay, Rachel, now I'm not sacrificing my sleep. I'm not sacrificing my health, and I'm not sacrificing my relationships. So that means that I have a very finite amount of time. And I have to ask myself on a regular basis, if I don't do this today, who's even going to know? Who's even going to know? And if they do know, wouldn't they rather that I prioritize my self care, my well being, my relationships, my family, and get this out to them one day later than stay up until 2 a.m. or sacrifice, my morning workout that I don't know. You know what I'm saying, right? We place these unrealistic expectations on ourselves, thinking that we can, should, and need to do all of these things. But the reality is that it's just not sustainable. Yeah, you might hit that unrealistic goal here and there, which fuels us to keep trying to do it. Like, oh, I did it once. I should be able to keep doing it. No, we're going to burn ourselves out. We're going to exhaust ourselves. That exhaustion may not be from doing too much, it might be from expecting too much. So, try this, my friend. What do you think? Let me know. Can you practice setting more human sized expectations using the minimum baseline technique we talked about today, or whatever works for you? But most importantly, notice when you're beating yourself up, notice that negative voice in your head and try to practice self compassion, right? Non harming, ahimsa. You can maintain your success without the mental beatdown. I want to remind you, my friend, your worth is not tied to your productivity. I know that we live in a society where we tie our worth to how much we accomplish in a day, but you are worthy simply because you are. You are worthy simply because you are you. Your worth is not tied to your productivity. Sustainable success requires sustainable standards. Easier said than done. I'm not going to lie, but you can maintain quality without needing perfection. You can maintain quality without needing perfection. This is a hard one for many of us. And I just want you to think about this. Being human is not the same as falling short. Just because you cannot sustain superwoman standards or superhuman standards, just because you're human, being human is not the same as falling short. I don't know when we started setting such high expectations for ourselves, when we started thinking we needed to be on all the time, when we needed to do all the things for all the people all the time. It's not sustainable. It's too much. It's not healthy. It's unrealistic. It's unsustainable. But we think we should do it. And we're our toughest critics oftentimes, right? So here's what I want you to remember. You can still do amazing things without pushing yourself so hard. You don't have to choose between being successful and being kind to yourself. When you set goals that fit real life, not some perfect fantasy life, right? You'll get where you want to go without feeling exhausted all the time. If you're nodding your head right now, thinking, all right, Rachel, I'm okay. I'm ready to try this. I've got something exciting coming in January. I am relaunching my Wildly Aligned Women, my signature group program, where we're going to be diving into creating your wildly aligned life of your dreams without the exhaustion. We're going to be putting these principles into practice together. So, if you are ready to break free from exhaustion overload, if you are ready to step into sustainable success, if you are ready to unlock the wildly aligned life of your dreams, join the waitlist. You'll be the first person to know when registration opens, and you will have access to early bird bonuses. So the link is in the show notes. And until next week, I'm Rachel, and I just want to remind you that you've got this, my friend, even if your cookies came from the store. So thank you for listening to the Magic Mindfulness podcast, and I will see you in the next episode.